Hey everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the Realistic Flying in the Longitude series. In part 1, we did an entire cockpit tour looking at every single button, knob, switch, and control that is operable in the Citation Longitude in Microsoft Flight Simulator. And today we are going to now focus in on one specific instrument inside the cockpit, that being the Garmin G5000 Avionics suite. We touched on this a little bit in the cockpit tour, just where it's located, some of the information on the screens, things like that. We didn't really dive into the functionality of the G5000, and that's what this video is intended for. Essentially, what we're going to do is similar to what we did in the cockpit tour. We're basically just going to go through the entire G5000 via the touch panel, looking at every option available on there, every button, what everything does. And just get an overall understanding of how it works. We won't be entering in flight plans or procedures or anything like that. That will come in a later video as we get closer to preparing to make a flight. But this is just understanding what all of the options are in the G5000, what they do, and basically how to operate them within the simulator. So let's go down and take a look at it. So this is the G5000. These two main touch controllers will contain most of the functionality within this avionics package. They sit just below the MFD multifunction display, and this is where you will enter in flight plan information, procedure, different things like that. There are the pilot side touch panels as well. These are actually called, I believe, GTCs, Garmin Touch Controllers. So you may hear me refer to them as that, or a touch panel, or a touch screen. That's essentially what I'm talking about. But both sides, the pilot side and the co-pilot side, have one here that doesn't have all of the options that the two on the main panel that sit below the main MFD screen have, but you can do some similar things on both of them. So I think what we will do is go ahead and start with the pilot side GTCs here, walk through the functionality that they have, and then work our way back to the two center ones that will have a lot more of the functionality. So we did look at these in that first video. I did mention that up here near the top is basically your radio stack in the Longitude. It's not a traditional knobs and analog screen like you see in a lot of other aircraft. It's all in the touch control pad here, and it basically contains two navigation frequencies, two comm frequencies, and there are some other options down here, but they're not operable, so we won't be discussing those really at this point. It's pretty standard in terms of you just click them, enter in the frequencies that you want, and then hit enter or transfer if you want to make them the active frequency, and then they will put them in the display showing you what you have listed for your active communications or navigation frequencies. You also have your transponder information up here. So your different modes for the transponder, and then if you want to, or when you actually do need to change the code depending on what ATC tells you, then you enter that in here, hit enter, and then that will populate up here in the top right portion of this control of this screen. Moving down here, it has your main nav source. So this is where you would shuffle between nav 1, nav 2, or FMS mode. These obviously are inoperable. They're not lit up at this point. Two different bearing options here. Nav 1, Nav 2, GPS, ADF, and then the same thing on the bearing 2 option as well. There's an option to enter in your speed bugs to show up on your speed tape on the PFD screen when you're taking off or landing. It's got all of your different V speeds here, where you can click them to turn them on, turn them off, and then you would enter in the values there. And then there is takeoff and landing. Options for timers. If you want to start a timer, you can count it up. You can start a timer to count down. Whatever you want to do, you can click on it, enter in the information there. Just a way for you to have an ability to set timers for anything you may need. The option to enter in your minimums when you're setting up for your landing. So you can enter in the information there and then determine how you want the source of the minimum to be set. option for a traffic map. Essentially what this is going to do is when you select that, it will put a traffic map insert up here onto your PFD screen. So you can see as we uncheck that, it'll make it go away. The traffic map options for that will be in the two main touch control screens that we'll look at here in just a moment. PFD map settings, or actually, I'm sorry, you can also get to those traffic settings from this one as well. PFD map settings. So you have option for inset map, which again will put a different map into the PFD screen there for you. The orientation, depending on how you want your PFD map to be oriented, whether you got heading up, track up, or north up. Map sync, which will make the map that you have on the screen sync across all the displays, each of the three displays here, onto the one in the center and the co-pilot side as well. And then this map detail option, which essentially you can just, it's an easy slider to move up and down just to determine, and at this point we're looking at the small inset map right now, how much you want to show or not show on those map screens. As I said, traffic option here to put that screen up, and then different settings in terms of what you want to show for traffic. So here were all of your transponder modes that you could put in, whether you want relative or absolute altitude displays, and then altitude range, unrestricted, normal, above, all the different options there that you could have showing on the map. Motion vector and vector duration options for that as well, between absolute, relative, and then depending on the duration you want to choose. Another map setting button here that will determine which labels you want to have shown on your different guides that you have out front, showing you how far it is to a certain point or spot on the map. You can determine how far in or out you want that to look. The aviation tab will determine what shows up on the map, whether you want airways, airports, VORs, INTs, or NDBs to show up. And then depending on each one of those selections, you then have a set of sub-criteria that you can then choose based on whatever it is you're wanting to look at. So depending on the types of airports and things like that you want to have show up on the map. In terms of land, things that show on the base of the map, cities, states, depending on how far away you are from them, and then depending on the size of city, all of those options of whether or not you want that information to show up on the maps. And then other, you got north up above a certain distance, track vector, depending on how far ahead you want to have a track vector show up on the map itself. A fuel ring showing how far you can go based on your remaining fuel plus your reserves here, and you can put in that information as well. And then range to altitude, another option that you can have show up on the map as well. The PFD settings, so this is now mainly for all those settings were essentially for the map that you would have inset on your PFD. The PFD settings themselves now apply to the remainder of the screen, the larger area on the screen here. AOA, angle of attack, you can have that on, off, or auto. You can see that that is going to be right here. SVT terrain, you can either enable or disable. So when you have it disabled, you can see it looks like a standard map that you would usually see in other aircraft. If you go ahead and turn on the terrain, it gives more of a dynamic terrain based on what you're looking at or what is out in front of you. So as of right now, we are parked at the Sedona Airport, so when you look out ahead, you can see the mountains and things out in front of us do match what is showing down on the PFD screen. I almost exclusively fly with this on. I'm sure there are instances where you may want to have that shut off, but in my opinion, that's one of the best features with this G5000 suite. Wind options, you have an option that will show wind information. As of right now, we're not moving, so we don't have any wind information, but it will show right down here if you have it turned on. There are three options. One will just show speed. One will show two different speeds, both your heading speed, I guess you would say, basically straight ahead of you, and then also the wind speed straight off of the side from 90 degrees, perpendicular to the heading. And then the third option, which I keep it on, will just give you an arrow from the exact direction that the wind is coming out of, and then it will also give you that direction in terms of degrees, and then it will also tell you the speed in which the wind is blowing, and that's option 3. The baro units, you can select whether you have that in inches or HPA. And then meter overlays, you can select to turn that on or off depending on if you want those to show up on the PFD screen as well. That is mainly all of the settings on the pilot side touch control. So if we hop over and look at now the two main ones, they're mainly, when we talk about these, it's going to be a lot more flight plan related stuff. These also, in terms of map settings and things like that, have the exact same options as what we just looked at. So I won't go over all of these again, but I'm mainly just going to touch on the ones that these two screens have that the pilot side and co-pilot side touch controllers don't. So the map settings are almost pretty much identical. Same with traffic settings. When you select each one of these, it will put it up on the screen. I'm going to try and do the best angle here that can allow you to see both the screen and the touch controller as well. So if we switch over to traffic, it will turn the main MFD screen into the traffic screen. And then at that point, if you click again, you now open up all of those traffic settings that we saw over on the Pilot GTC. And then if you wanted to go back to the normal map setting, you would just click the map button again. You have the normal map, and if you click that again, now you have all of those same map settings. One of the first things that this one has that the pilot side GTCs don't are the weather options. So if you click the weather button once, you'll get the weather radar that will pull up. And at this point, it's not on. The only thing I've done in this aircraft so far is I started up the battery and turned on the APU just so we would have power to be able to look at all this. So I don't have the radar or anything actually on the aircraft. So if you select the weather selection again, it'll bring up the WX radar settings. You click that, and now you have all of the options for the weather radar. So right now it's in standby mode, so you can select radar on, and now the radar is actually on and picking up actual data to put into the weather radar here. So it's not rainy or anything. I think I have it on clear skies outside, so obviously we're not seeing anything. But then, let me hop down closer. There we go. You can see then the options that you have. So, well, it's going to be hard to... Let's look at it this way. So when you select the different options, you will have your scan mode, so you can look at it horizontally, or you can look at it vertically. So this would be as if you were flying right through the center of this triangle here. It's looking this far above you and this far below you. In terms of, this is a good idea to know if you're above or below the weather. If you leave it on horizontal, this is, of course, the direction that you're flying straight out ahead, and this is looking at it from a horizontal level, whether the weather is to the left or to the right of you. Those are really the only two options as of right now that you really have with the weather radar in terms of controls. Hopefully a lot of this in the future will become more operable, but and then you also have the bearing line showing the direction that you would be going. You can remove that or leave it on there. So there are some options, not a ton, but you can have the weather radar through the G5000, which is a pretty cool feature, especially for a simulator. The next line here really has to do with flight planning, essentially. As I said, we will go in and enter in a flight plan from beginning to end in a future video, but right now I'm just going to touch on these right quick just to show you what each one does, but then again, not go into too great of detail with it, just for the sake of doing that when we are actually going to be entering a flight plan. It'll make a lot more sense. The Direct To button is basically an option when you do have waypoints in here, when you have a flight plan in here, you can select this to basically send the current track directly to a certain waypoint and not necessarily following the order that they are in the flight plan. So here, if we did have waypoints in, you would be able to select one of them, tell it to go direct to, and it would go directly to that waypoint, and then pick up the flight plan after that waypoint going forward. So you can see there are VNAV options and things like that, a bunch of different things you could put in here. And so when we enter in a flight plan, we'll get more into that as well. The actual flight plan tab itself, this is where you would enter in the flight plan. You would always start out by adding your origin and destination and then all of your waypoints in between. There's another link to that direct to button in this same window. The procedure tab is going to have all of your departure, arrival, and approach procedures. So once you have your flight plan filed and you have what departure and what arrival procedure you're going to have in your flight plan, this is where you would go to select those, and then based on your airport and all that kind of stuff, grab all of the information you have and then be able to load it into the active flight plan in the FMS. Standby flight plan, this would be if you have a backup or you have another one that you want to utilize, you can enter that information in here, and just in case the one that you had entered doesn't work out or you want to change it, you can have the other one already loaded in and ready to go, and basically not have to worry about trying to enter that if you're up in the air or wherever. Final tab here, flight plan options. This is where you have the option to show it up on the map. So if you choose that, it would show your flight plan, basically a zoomed out version of it, showing from beginning to end and all the waypoints in between. You can delete the flight plan that you currently have in the system, or you can edit different data fields, your desired track. You can look at what is going to be showing up in certain screens when it comes to your flight plan. So you can determine distance, desired track, cumulative distance, a bunch of other options here that you want to, you may want to have show up on those screens while you're working with the flight plan. The rest of these we'll see when we enter the flight plan, but I believe the rest of these are always inoperable. So right now they don't work. So not ones that we need to be concerned about. The procedure tab, this is just a main screen shortcut tab to go to the procedures that we accessed in the flight plan as well. So just takes you to the exact same screen. The chart screen is very nice to have. Only thing is, this will only work if you have an active Navigraph subscription. So essentially what this is this allows, if you do have Navigraph, and again, Navigraph is something that we will talk about here in a video coming up in this series, but Navigraph is essentially a service offered where you pay a small monthly fee. I think it's around $8 a month, or you can decide to pay by a year and get it for a little bit cheaper. But for what it does, $8, $9 a month, whatever it is, in my opinion, a pretty darn good value if you're a pretty hardcore flight simulator user, and if you like to try and fly realistically, and if you fly on things like the VATSIM network and things like that that require flight plans and different things like that try and keep the realism really packed into the experience. Navigraph is a tool that provides you all of the different stars and SIDs and approach and different kinds of charts that you would use in real world aviation. All these for these different airports and things that you might be flying into. A Navigraph subscription allows you to access all of those, and on some aircraft in the game, the Longitude being one of them, you can link your account in the G5000 here, and you would have the option to pull up those charts, and then they would show up here on the screen whenever you want to access one. So I do utilize this sometimes. You can also use it from the in-game menu up here. If you have Navigraph, they give you an in-game menu that would then allow you to pull up the charts. You can also access it on, if you have an iPad, you can pull them up there. They have an app as well. But then the other option is you can also pull them up in the actual G5000 suite in the Longitude as well, which is pretty cool. So we will go more in depth into this again when we get to that part in a future video with Navigraph and things like that. But this is where you would go to access those charts. So we're here at Sedona, so we would be able to see all of the different charts that they have. The chart options, again, you can fit width. That means when you select a chart, it's going to show up on here. Typically, they're going to be in a portrait format, so there'll be some black on the sides here, but then that's where you have these options to where you can fit the width, and it'll zoom it in so it fits the entire width of the screen up here. You can change the mode from day to night or auto, so it changes the screen color depending on the time of day it is, the thresholds around the edges of the screen, and different things like that. Just for displaying your charts up on the screen. So really powerful tool here, and if you do utilize Navigraph as part of your simming experience, you can really get a lot out of it, especially in the Longitude. Aircraft systems, checklist, and music options all inoperable at this time. It will be awesome if all three of those become operable in the future, because they also will have some really powerful use inside the G5000. The checklist and aircraft systems for sure, and then music would just be kind of fun to have, I suppose. But right now, they do not work, so we will not talk about them. The Utilities tab is basically going to have just a bunch of setup options and things like that. This is where you would come if you do have Navigraph, and you would select this database status, and this would allow you to then link your Navigraph account in the G5000 and make it so that those charts and all that are now going to show up in the game when you want to utilize them. Avionics settings are basically just going to have a bunch of different settings when it comes to how you want time to show, how you want different units of measure to show, different things like that. So your time formats, if you want 12-hour, 24-hour military time type things, Zulu time, you can change all of that in there. You can change time offsets. When you pull up an option to show you the nearest runway, you can determine what sort of surface that has, depending on what aircraft you're flying. If it can only land on certain surfaces, you can limit down the nearest airport only to show ones that have that certain type of surface. And then also the same thing with runway length. For the units of measurement, again, your nav angle looks at magnetic degrees. Your distance and speed, you can put it in knots or kilometers, things like that. Your external temperatures, you can actually move from Celsius to Fahrenheit if you want. That may be something I change in the future. It's just I'm more familiar with it, and so fuel, you can show whether you got it in gallons, liters, pounds, and kilograms. So just a bunch of options there for basically changing your units of measure depending on what you're looking at. The final tab here, MFD fields. This is going to be on your multifunction display. These fields up here in purple. These will always show up here when you're making a flight, and basically you can determine which fields show up there. So I have mine set the way that I want to see it, but yeah, you have basically all of these options to choose from. So ground speed, distance to destination, your track, estimated time en route, your bearing, your distance to the next waypoint, your fuel over your destination, how much fuel you're going to have left when you get there, and then just your overall estimated time of arrival, which will show just a normal, time depending on how you have it set. If you have it on 12-hour, and it may show that your arrival time is going to be 3 p.m. or whatever. So that's the way that you would basically customize what you want to show up here near the top. Another speed bugs option, it's the exact same one that was on the pilot side. Waypoint info. This is a way that you can look up information about different waypoints. You can access this information when you have a flight plan set up, and let's actually go ahead. And I'm just going to put in, I think we're at KSED is Sedona? No. Well, let's just put in one that we know. We'll just do LAX. So when you actually have a waypoint in, if you click on it, you will see that it'll bring up these different options, and one of them being waypoint info. And once you do that, essentially it's going to then give you information about that waypoint or that airport, depending on what the waypoint is, give you different information about it. So its bearing location, the distance to it from where you currently sit, its latitude and longitude numbers, the elevation that it sits at. So this is helpful when you're determining minimums for landing. And then these time, fuel, and public. I don't know that I've really ever seen those change, so I don't know if they update each time or not. So I'm not sure if those are operable or not. But basically, gives you airport information. There's a frequencies tab that will give you all of the different radio frequencies for that airport. So yeah, LAX is going to have a bunch. But it will also then give you, if they have ILS arrivals and things like that, or ILS approaches, it'll give you the frequencies to then put in for those different localizers. So this information is available again on those Jeppesen charts. So if you have your Navigraph subscription, you would see like these localizer frequencies and things on the ILS plate chart for this particular approach. But you can also just hop in here and grab it from here. And when you click on it, you can then put it in one of the active or standby nav frequencies. Weather, APT, direct, charts, NOTAMs, and procedures I have not seen ever really populated with any of these. So I don't believe any of those are operable at this time. The other option here then is runways. It will show you all the runways that airport has, assuming it's an airport. And then gives you basically the information there. But that was how you would access it through the flight plan. So then again, like I say, when it comes to the waypoint information tab, you can do exactly what we just did, except it just kind of breaks it out depending on what type that waypoint is. So you would just click on it and then select the options. And then depending on what type of waypoint, again, like it is, you can go direct to it. You can add it to your flight plan, different things like that. Another powerful button because you can see a lot of useful information there. That's all inside of this G5000 Avionics, which is really cool. The nearest tab is, again, very similar to the waypoint tab. It's going to give you those same options, but basically this is just going to tell you when you select one of these airports, it's going to tell you what the nearest airport is to you. So obviously we're here in Sedona, so we're right there, no distance away from it. This Cottonwood Airport, 14 miles away. Tells you the runway length and things like that. Just gives you some real quick information if you need to make a quick diversion or need to get out of the sky quickly. Shows you what's around and what will work for you. As you remember from the one of the settings tabs we had, where it gave you an option for airports, and if you wanted to show ones that only had a certain runway length, I think ours was set at 3,000, so you can see none of these airports that show up when we click nearest airport, none of them have a runway length that's shorter than 3,000 feet. So that's why you want to update those settings so that they're correct for your aircraft, because again, if we just had no setting in there, it's going to show you every airport around here, including, grass strips that are 800 feet long or something like that. That's obviously just going to jumble up this list when you really only want to be able to see things that are going to work for your aircraft. So that is what that setting does, and really the only other thing that is left on the G5000 here, but it's a very powerful button, is this half button. And if I pan out here, let's click map just so it takes us back to our map. This half button, if you click it, what it's going to do is essentially split your MFD screen in half, and now you have the ability to put different things up on each side of the screen here. I don't use this too often, but it is extremely handy, especially if you do maybe some sort of shared cockpit flight, if you do that with somebody, where maybe they want to be pulling something up on the right side of the screen. Or again, if you're flying by yourself and you just want to be able to keep your map up on one side, but you want to look up something on another side, you can hit the half button there, and it will pull up a secondary screen for you. And then I need to find out. Yeah, so the middle button here, if you click down on it, I believe it's supposed to be this button over here that I want to say that it toggles, but maybe it doesn't. So the middle button, though, if you click on it and hold and then scroll your mouse wheel, you can see that it's changing between the left and right side. That's how you select which side you want to have active. And so if I select the right side, now when I do all the touch controls down here, all of it's only going to be applying to this side of the map. So say I want to have my map up here, but I want to show weather on this side. I would select this side like I have here, choose the weather option, and now I can have the weather radar up while we're flying as well. So if it's stormy out, you want to always see the weather radar, but you don't necessarily want to have it taking up the entire screen. You can split the screen and then have it set up to do this, and then again, you can just use this to go back and select your other map, and then using these buttons down here. We touched on these briefly in the first video. A lot of these are just twist knobs, so if you click and hold on them and then scroll your mouse up and down, that's what will allow you to interact with those controls. The main one being this right knob here. If you click on it and hold down and then scroll your mouse wheel, that's going to be the zoom. That's probably the one you'll use the most. So you can really zoom in on your location on the map, or you can back out of it, to whatever distance you want to be looking ahead. And that's where this ring over here is going to tell you how far out in front of you this is. So here we're looking at 2.5 nautical miles out in front of us to the north there. So all in all, that is mainly the G5000 here in the Citation Longitude. So it's extremely powerful. Really, I mean, once we get into it with a flight plan, you'll see a lot more of what it can do and the different capabilities of it. One of the things I didn't touch on because we weren't putting in a flight plan necessarily is the VNAV option. This does have vertical navigation built in. You can enable it. And if we had a flight plan in here with some altitudes dialed in for certain waypoints, this is extremely handy when you're doing descents. And the only problem with it is, as of right now, it doesn't work to its full capability. It's right now what you would call an advisory VNAV. And what that means is that when it's enabled, like we have it here, and when you have it enabled up on the autopilot panel, and you have a flight plan entered in that has some altitude restrictions for an approach that you're doing, where you've got 10,000 feet at one waypoint, and then the next waypoint coming up in 10 miles, you need to be at 8,000 feet. That information would be in your flight plan. And when you have VNAV enabled here in both places, over here on your altimeter, you would see on the left side here, purple would show up, and on the right side, another purple caret would show up. I'm sorry, a purple caret, not just purple. A purple caret would show up over here, and another little caret looks just like this one, but it's purple as well, would show up, and then you would have an altitude right over here next to your main altitude reading. That would be your vertical navigation altitude. And essentially that would show if your next waypoint you need to be at 8,000 feet and you're currently at 10,000, you would show 10,000 here, 8,000 right here, and then the vertical navigation would essentially start as you get closer to where you need to be at your top of descent to start descending down. Those little carets would start moving down, and the one on the right here is going to show you what your vertical speed needs to be for you to hit that waypoint at the 8,000 feet or whatever it is it needs to be. And if it worked like it should, as that worked its way down and the caret over here worked its way down to line up with where you would be in the center, which would be your top of descent, as soon as that hit that mark, you would start descending. And it would do your vertical speed on your descent based on what is entered in here. And when this is actually working and you have a flight plan in here, I think it shows that it's like 3 degrees is what it uses for its vertical descent flight plan, or vertical descent, essentially. The angle is which it's going to go down as it descends. Usually I think it's set to 3 degrees. Now, I don't think you can change that. Maybe in the future you'll be able to, because maybe you have the particular aircraft you're flying, it's different depending on that. But that works. It shows you everything. It just doesn't automatically start doing it. So essentially what you would have to do is you would have to control your speed, and in the longitude with auto throttle, that's really easy. You can set the auto throttle to whatever speed you want while you descend and just let that control itself. And then what you would need to do is just track these carets, depending on where they fall on here, what vertical speed it tells you. If this one's hovering around the 2, that means you need to be descending at about 2,000 feet per minute to hit your mark. So then you would just use the vertical speed in the AP panel up here, you would select vertical speed, and then you would just start controlling that down, and you would just try to keep everything in line with where it needs to be. And as long as you do that, you should hit each waypoint altitude at where you're supposed to. That probably sounded really convoluted and hard to follow, and we will go over that. We'll actually fly in I don't know if we'll do it separately or if maybe when we make the actual flight kind of near the end of the series, you'll see it more in depth. But it'll make 100% sense when you actually see it happening over here, and the procedure that you need to do to then follow that. Essentially what it does is it makes it more real world when it comes to your descent. You're not just, looking at or listening to ATC instruction and they say, please descend to 6,000 feet, and you just nose down and start dropping at, 12 or 14 degree angle, and just 6,000 feet a minute. That wouldn't be real life. If you were hauling passengers, obviously that would not be a good thing at all. This just basically does it the way that it's supposed to be done. And, if you've flown on an airline or anything else, obviously when they start descending, it's almost impossible for you to really tell that that's actually happening. And that's because they're descending at such a low angle and on a vertical navigation descent pattern to where it descends like it's supposed to and keeps everything perfect and all of that. So again, right now this is just advisory vertical navigation. So you do have to do a little extra work. The plane's not going to do everything for you, but it definitely is extremely handy. So got off on a tangent there. We will go over that in a future video, but I just wanted to mention that because I didn't touch on that. But yeah, so that is the G5000 in a nutshell. There's plenty about it that doesn't work, but I'm hoping in future updates and with some of the talented developers and companies out there that are doing stuff for Flight Simulator and the Longitude and pretty much every aircraft, somebody will really make an improvement upon it and have it working almost to the point where the one in real life, how it works and has the capabilities. So that is everything. If I missed something or if you have any questions about something, leave it down in the comments and I will do my best to get you an answer. But that is my knowledge on the G5000 of how it operates, again, in the sim. Disclaimer, this is all stuff happening in the simulator. This is not applying this to real life. This is how the G5000 sits right now in the simulator and how we use it in Microsoft Flight Simulator and with the Longitude. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for part 3 coming up here in the next little while, next several days. So thanks a lot, everybody. See you later.